I'm Marcus, and before I tell you about the day that changed my life forever, the day I went from being just another struggling mechanic to standing face to face with a billionaire who shocked the entire world with one simple, life-changing question, I need to tell you how I got here. Because truth be told, that moment on the runway didn't just happen out of nowhere. It came after years of sweat, disappointment, and a life that felt like it was always just one step behind everyone else's. My childhood and early struggles. I was born on the south side of Chicago, the second of 4 kids. My mother worked 2 jobs, mostly housekeeping and cafeteria shifts, while my father wasn't around much. He'd show up when he felt like it, but for the most part, Mom carried the entire family on her shoulders. We grew up in a neighborhood where dreams were often smaller than the block you lived on, the kind of place where making it out felt like winning the lottery. But even as a kid, I was obsessed with machines. I didn't have fancy toys, but give me a broken radio or busted bike, and I'd spend hours trying to figure it out. By the time I was 13, I could fix almost anything with wheels. Neighbors started paying me a few bucks to repair their bikes, patch tires, even work on old lawnmowers. I didn't realize it then, but those little moments, those grease-stained afternoons in the backyard, were the seeds of everything that would come later. But dreams don't pay bills. When I graduated high school, college wasn't even a conversation. I barely had enough money for community college applications, let alone tuition. So I did what I knew. I started working at local garages, picking up shifts wherever I could. The weight of struggle. Being a black mechanic in a city where connections mattered more than skill wasn't easy. I knew my craft. I could rebuild an engine blindfolded. I could listen to a motor cough once and tell you what was wrong. But still, people underestimated me. I'd get customers who'd look past me and ask for the real mechanic. I'd see job openings go to guys who barely knew a wrench from a ratchet, just because they knew someone on the inside. And no matter how many hours I worked, no matter how many side hustles I picked up, it felt like I was always living paycheck to paycheck. At 28, I was still renting a tiny studio apartment with peeling paint, sharing it with a roach problem I never seemed to beat. My fridge was always half empty. I had dreams of one day opening my own auto shop, but that felt as far away as owning a private island. And I'll admit it, there were nights I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my grease-stained hands, wondering if this was it, if this was all my life would ever be. The breaking point. A winter night, I got called in for an emergency repair. It was freezing, the kind of cold that bites through layers. I spent 6 hours outside, my hands numb, fixing a fuel pump on a corporate jet. By the time I was done, my body was shaking. When I got home, I collapsed on my bed in my work clothes. I hadn't eaten all day, and the only thing in my fridge was a carton of milk a few days past expired. That night, I told myself maybe it was time to quit. Maybe this wasn't worth it. Maybe I was just fooling myself thinking I could ever climb higher. But life has a way of testing you hardest right before it changes everything. The call that changed everything. It was a Saturday morning when the airport dispatcher called me. A private jet had reported issues just before takeoff. The regular lead mechanics were tied up, and Miller wanted me on the case immediately. I didn't think much of it. Another job, another headache. But when I got to the runway and saw the jet, I froze. This wasn't just any plane. This was a billionaire's jet. Sleek, white, with gold trim along the body, the kind of plane you'd only ever see in magazines. The kind of plane that probably cost more than my entire neighborhood combined. And standing near it, arguing with the crew, was a woman I recognized immediately. Not personally, but from TV, from news articles, from Forbes magazine covers. She was her, the billionaire, the woman they called the Steel Rose in business circles, one of the richest, most powerful people in the country. And somehow, on that cold morning, fate had placed her jet in my hands. When I saw her, I froze. Her name was Cassandra Sterling, The world knew her as the CEO of Sterling Aeronautics, a billionaire whose face was splashed across every business magazine you could think of. Some called her ruthless, some called her brilliant. All I knew was she was right there on the runway, her long coat whipping in the wind, her voice sharp as she barked at her assistants. And me? I was just Marcus, a mechanic with grease under his nails, a paycheck that barely covered rent, and a toolbox that suddenly felt way too small for the job at hand. "Who's handling this?" she snapped, her eyes scanning the crew. Miller, my supervisor, pointed at me. "Marcus will get you sorted." I swear I felt every set of eyes snap to me at once. The billionaire, her entourage, the flight crew, even the pilots. And in that moment, I wasn't Marcus the mechanic. I was Marcus, the last thin line between her jet and total disaster. I cleared my throat, forced my legs to move, and approached the jet. "Ma'am, I'll need a few minutes to diagnose the issue." Her gaze landed on me, and I swear, it felt like being cut open. Sharp, calculating, impatient. "Minutes I don't have. My meeting in New York is non-negotiable." Her words weren't cruel, but they carried weight. The kind of weight that could crush a man who doubted himself. The diagnosis. The jet was sleek, a Gulfstream that probably cost upwards of $50 million, and right now it wasn't going anywhere. The crew told me they'd had engine irregularities during startup, pressure fluctuations and warnings on the auxiliary systems. Could have been a sensor issue, could have been a fuel flow problem, could have been a dozen different things. I knelt by the open panel, tools in hand, and started working. My breath fogged in the cold air, my fingers trembling, not from the chill, but from the pressure. Every sound around me echoed. Cassandra's sharp heel tapping the tarmac, the low murmur of her assistants, the hum of the ground crew, and all I could think was, "Don't mess this up, Marcus. Not this time." Flashbacks of doubt. As I worked, flashes of my past swirled in my head. The times I've been underestimated, the times I've been passed over, the times I've been told, "You're good, but not good enough." That voice tried to creep in again, whispering, "You're not supposed to be here. This is above your pay grade. She's not going to remember you even if you pull it off." But I shoved it down, because right then, nothing mattered except the machine in front of me. Cassandra's presence. "Is this going to take long?" she asked suddenly, her voice slicing through my concentration. I looked up. She was standing closer now, arms folded, eyes narrowed. She wasn't just impatient, she was watching me, studying me. I forced myself to stay calm. "I'll be as quick as possible, ma'am, but if I rush and miss something, this plane doesn't leave the ground at all." For a split second, something flickered across her face. Respect, maybe, or surprise that I dared to push back. But then it was gone, replaced by the steel expression she was famous for. "Do it," she said simply. The breakthrough. Hours of work compressed into minutes. I checked the fuel lines, recalibrated the sensors, and traced the problem to a clogged filter that had been overlooked during routine maintenance. It wasn't just a small error. It was something that could have caused a catastrophic failure mid-flight. "Got it," I muttered under my breath, pulling the part free. "What is it?" Cassandra asked. She was still watching, closer than before. "It's a clogged fuel filter. It's simple, but dangerous if ignored. I'll replace it now." She tilted her head slightly, and for the first time, her tone softened. "You caught it in time?" "Yes, ma'am, but whoever signed off on the last check, they missed this." She glanced at her crew, her expression darkening. They shifted uncomfortably. The human side. As I worked to replace the part, she crouched down slightly, just enough to see what I was doing. Billionaires don't usually crouch near grease-stained mechanics, but there she was. "You've done this before?" she asked quietly. I almost laughed. "Ma'am, I've been fixing engines since I was a kid. They may not have wings, but they all have hearts, and I know how to keep a heart beating." Her lips curved just slightly, not a full smile, but something close. Interesting way to put it. I shrugged, tightening the bolts. Machines talk if you know how to listen. The moment of truth. With the filter replaced, I ran the systems check. The hum of the engine filled the air, smooth and steady this time. Every gauge lined up perfectly. "It's ready," I said, stepping back. My chest rose and fell with relief. The pilot confirmed it. The crew exhaled audibly. And Cassandra? She stood tall, her gaze locked on me. "You saved us," she said simply. I shook my head, just doing my job. But she didn't look away. And in that silence, something shifted. For the first time in my life, I felt seen. Not just as a background worker, not as the guy in the shadows, but as a man who mattered. The hum of the jet's engine still